Welcome to the Hope After Narcissistic Abuse podcast. I am your host, Amy Helms. Each week, you will hear from experts across the country and even world speak to you on recovering from narcissistic abuse and even how to manage these relationships. You will also hear some periodic solo episodes on how to manage these relationships and what recovery is like. It is my hope that you will leave each episode with some renewed hope that you can and will beat this. Thank you for tuning in. Hi, welcome to another episode of Hope After Narcissistic Abuse. Today, I'm excited to welcome Karen McMahon as our guest. Karen is a certified relationship and divorce coach and founder of Journey Beyond Divorce. She began divorce coaching in 2010 after recognizing the pain of her divorce and led her on a transformational journey into a powerful and unexpected new life. Karen leads a national team of divorce coaches in supporting men and women around the world to become calm, clear, and confident as they navigate divorce. Karen is the host of the acclaimed Journey Beyond Divorce podcast, co-author of Stepping Out of Chaos, Turning Pain to Positivity, creator of JBD's exclusive accelerated divorce recovery program. Welcome, Karen. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Amy. Thanks so much for inviting me on.
I know you have some programs about, dealing with conflict. Can you explain to our listeners what, a high conflict person would look like? What is that?
Yeah, I think that's such a great place to begin. So, we really specialize in highly complex divorces, and high conflict falls into that category. And so, as you and I were talking offline, in today's day and age, a lot of people are quick to say that they're married to, they're working for, they're divorcing a narcissist. And so, first of all, there's a lot of personality disorders out there. Borderline personality disorder is a really difficult one too. There's sociopaths and psychopaths. I am not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, and my feeling is understanding the tendencies and behaviors of these high conflict personalities is really where we want to start. And so a few things that you might experience if you're listening and you think that you're involved with a high conflict personality, whatever label you're giving them, some of the things that you're going to notice is very black and white thinking. I'm right, you're wrong. Always, never. And so there's very little gray. And so when these high conflict personalities engage in a disagreement, there's so little compromise of flexibility because their thinking is completely black and white. One of the things I say is that oftentimes they have like a 365-degree blind spot to their own part in anything. And so another thing that you experience is blame and accusation. And so it's always your fault. And there's never, or very, very rarely, does this personality take responsibility. And when they do, they'll say, I did that, but I did that because of you, because you caused me to do that. So they actually still don't take responsibility. So we've got black and white thinking.
This is like good or bad too, right? These are good
absolutely.
Or bad. I'm good. Yeah.
Exactly. And then another thing is that they rarely show empathy. And so, I remember with my divorce, there were times where I would go to my soon-to-be ex and I would just be crushed and scared and want to talk to him. And there was just, it was so assaulting to have this man that I loved and I married who had no ability to empathize with anything on my end. And so that lack of empathy is a big one. A really confusing behavior that I think we all kind of get caught in is revisionist history. And I don't know if you experience this, but it's like so often the way I would remember something and the way he would remember something was like we couldn't have been in the same spot experiencing the same thing because it was so completely different. When I was engaged And just an example, and me and my ex I lent him some money. We were engaged. We went to an attorney. He was suing his client, and he did all of the talking. And the attorney got to say very little bit. But the one thing that I heard was the attorney said, you don't have too much of a case here. This is really kind of iffy. I can try, but there are no guarantees. But everything coming out of my ex's or then fiance's mouth was, this is a solid case. And, this is a slam dunk. And we got in the car to leave, and he was so excited. And now I'm engaged. This was one of my many red flags. And he was like, this guy is my guy, and we're going to win. And the lawyer said, and I was like, the lawyer didn't say that. You were the only one who said that. The lawyer said quite the opposite. And I remember just being so confused that we're two intelligent people who experienced the exact same meeting and had completely different perspectives. And so if you're married or you're in relationship with someone, it's you're trying to wrap your brain around how is it possible that all of these memories that I have are so in conflict with this other person's memories.
Right. And they can be so convincing. Remember in our initial 30-day hearing after I left, well, when I left, I did what he was at work, and he was served. But I just sent him a text that we were on the way to my parents and the kids were fine. But in the 30-day hearing, he had already transferred all the money into different accounts and, left me off everything. But he, did this fake cry, no tears, but held his hand down and had his hands in a prayer position and said that he had been at work that day and all of a sudden had this intuition that his family had been, home invaded and kidnapped. And so the only thing he thought to do was to transfer all the money out for protection. And he had no idea where we were. And I was looking at him thinking, I actually kind of believed it. He was telling the story so well. But then I was also seeing the text I had sent him. But he was so convincing. And so those two realities, it was just a good example of how they live totally different lives.
And I think that the reason these personalities is so convincing is, like, I'm not a very good liar. So if I'm trying to tell a story, I know I'm telling a story. When he told that story, it wouldn't surprise me if he actually believed it himself. Like I've been doing some studies on pathological lying, and it's like tied in that part of the reason they're so convincing is they're 1,000% sure that what's coming out of their mouth is the only truth there is. And so that those of us who are open-minded, who want to like understand other perspectives, you can really get caught in that. There's so many of these personality traits where I'm not going to say healthy minded, because if you're in a relationship with a high conflict personality, you're not healthy. You brought your dysfunction and your lack of health to the table too. And we'll talk, I'd like to talk a little bit about what that looks like. But so this personality and that revisionist history, or that believing 100%, is so confusing. The last two that I'll say is they always blame and accuse. So it's like, you're wrong. It's back to that, but it's like, you're wrong. You're the one who did this. It's your fault. And then and perhaps you could speak to this, when you come to the table with an issue, they deflect and you defend. And so people who are in relationships with high conflict personalities, when you come to the table to say, this is something that's really upsetting to me, I'd like to talk about it, what you'll get back is, you're upset? Well, I'm upset about that even more or you think that's an important issue? Well, here's my issue. And in seconds, you go from raising an issue to defending yourself, and your issue rarely ever gets addressed. And that's that deflect and defend dance. So that's about a half a dozen plus tendencies that your listeners can kind of tune in and see what boxes can you check off for the person that you're in a relationship with.
Right, and that's a great one. For me with the deflect, it was usually, I've worked hard all day, and how can you complain when I've done this? And you're blessed to be able to sit home with the children when I worked all day. And then, it was the guilt tripping for that. So then all of a sudden it was like, what did I even bring up?
Right. Exactly. Right, because now you're defending, well, that's not true. I mean, it takes a lot of energy, and I'm running the kids around, and I'm not sitting here like watching TV with my finger up my nose. But you're on the defensive when you actually brought up maybe, hey, I could use a little help. Let's kind of look at the division of labor. And 2 seconds later, the division of labor is out the window, and you're defending the fact that you're a busy person as a stay-at-home mom.
Right. And it was like forgetting that I paid for him to go to school and then stayed
Right,
home.
right.
It was just defending.
Yeah, so those are the tendencies. And then, I think the question is, why do we stay? And I've been doing this for 13 years now. And so, I've worked with so many people leaving high conflict marriages, and and some leave when the children are young, as I did. And many stay. And there's a lot of different reasons why we can tell ourselves to stay. And what I want to say is the decision to mend or end is an incredibly difficult one. Incredibly difficult. And when there are children, it's excruciating, because you know that you're about to change their paradigm. And so a lot of times people stay out of fear. So one fear is, I'm going to destroy our family and it's going to hurt the children. Right. And I think so many of us, I come from divorce. I never wanted to divorce. And I was worried about hurting the children. And what I've learned is that when you raise children in a dysfunctional marriage, they experience that dysfunctional love as intimate love. And so
And I think it's normal.
And it's totally normal. It's all they know. If you grow up in a household where there's physical abuse, it's all you know. Love and physical abuse are mutually connected. And so I'm a big fan of breaking generational chains. I come from a family, my dad was an alcoholic. My mom was a bit of a rageaholic. And I ended up marrying a version of the two of them mixed together. And so I don't want my children to grow up that way. So I left early, but I also, and so they had like 50-50 custody. So they were under dad's roof a lot. And the thing is, they had this very contrasting experience between mom's house and dad's house. And so while they lived with dysfunction, if I was under the same roof as my ex, I would have continued to be a hot mess. I would not have been able to be a stand for emotional intelligence and setting boundaries and speaking your voice and all of the other things that I taught my children and work with my clients on. And so if you're staying for the kids, you have to ask yourself, do I want my children to grow up and be in a relationship and a marriage like I'm in now? Because if I don't, staying is going to set them up for exactly that. And leaving and having at least one healthy parent under one of the roofs is better than having two parents, especially in conflict, under one roof. In fact, there's research that says it is not divorce that harms children. It is conflict that harms children. And so the more we can keep them from the conflict, the better.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the key thing to remember, is that even if you have 50-50 or whatever that is, that at least it's half the time that they're in a stable place.
Right.
But I think sometimes it's the fear that, they'll lose custody altogether, or, the threat of that, well, it's sometimes that, we'll at least, have them versus not having them.
Well, absolutely. So that's the other fear about the children is, especially if you've been a stay-at-home mom, and even if you haven't, the bottom line is, and even in my non-high conflict divorces, the bottom line is one of the things that we all have to come to terms with is we're not going to see our children every day. And in the beginning, it's heartbreaking. But what I will tell you is a healthy single parent uses the time away from their children to refresh, re-energize, recenter themselves so that they have the energy and focus to probably be out working and take care of the kids when the kids are with them. And so the children is one of the issues. And I think the other one that is really important is when you've been living with someone who has belittled and berated and put you down for years or decades, your sense of self is so broken. And having the self-confidence and the constitution to navigate a divorce when you're starting from such a broken place is really scary. Divorce is scary in general, but when you don't trust your own thoughts, when he or she, if it's a female narcissist and they're there too, or high conflict personality, if they're renting space between your ears, and this is what happened to me, when something would happen, if the kid got hurt or something, the first thought would be, what is my ex going to think? Because his reaction was so explosive, so volcanic, that I didn't even know what my initial thought and feeling about a situation was. I knew what his was. And so I had completely lost myself. So many of my clients experience the exact same thing where they have such a loss of self. Now, how do you choose to get off the fence? Because you know that you've been like, I shouldn't stay, I should stay. Maybe you've been in counseling. Maybe a couple of therapists have said to you, this personality's not changed. Well, but maybe I'll stay. You need to rebuild that self-confidence and that sense of self, because you can't go forward with self-doubt. You just stay. And we have a solution for that. But that's one of the big fears, right? As you're going through this, when you're not even trusting yourself, and here you're about to make all these big decisions about your children, about your finances, about your marital home.
Right. You don't want to go into court with that junk in your head, because you'll make decisions in a trauma response.
And that's not going to serve anybody.
No.
Yeah. And the other thing that we do is we listen to their words over their actions. And I'm going to say that again. If you've been listening to your spouse's words, and their words are, I love you, and I'm sorry, and I'll do better, and their actions are not aligned with their words, start paying attention to the actions and not the words. The actions are what's real. The words are just talk. And when people start doing that, when my clients, they'll come back after 1 or 2 sessions and go, oh my God, his or her actions and words are completely misaligned. The actions are what's real. And that's very helpful in making that decision, because the words pull you back. You're just about to make the decision, and then they say all the right things, and maybe I'll give him or her another chance. Pay attention to the actions.
Mm-hmm. Great advice. So I think another thing that holds people is, finances.
Finances.
What advice do you give for people with that?
Yeah. And I'm going to tell you, whether someone has hundreds of dollars or millions of dollars, we're all afraid of the finances. And the truth is, many of us will not continue the same lifestyle. And I'll tell you, my wealthy clients, it's like golden handcuffs. It's like, okay, so maybe you won't have the brand new car and the big house, and the kids won't have the 300 square foot play area, but you'll be free.
Or to even afford a lawyer is what I'm thinking. If they've been really controlled.
Yeah. And you have people in every socioeconomic level where the minute the divorce happens, all the funds could be pulled from the bank accounts, and you could be sitting there without. And that's why it's so vitally important to get educated before you tell this high conflict personality what you're doing, because if you say that you're divorcing before you've spoken to a matrimonial attorney and done some research or listened to some podcasts and understand what your legal rights are, you're going to believe what they tell you. You're going to believe that you're going to be on the street, you're going to be penniless, I'm going to get the kids, and that's just going to kick off your trauma response all the more. Even after people retain an attorney, so many people who have been in high conflict marriages will continue to listen to their exes or soon to be exes perspective on what's going to happen over their attorneys. And I want you to stop and think about that. It's like your matrimonial attorney lives in these waters, swims in these waters, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. This is what they do for a living. Unless your spouse is a matrimonial attorney, why in God's name would you listen to that person over the attorney? And why would your spouse know better legally what might happen than the attorney? And so these are ways that we kind of get in our own way.
Right. I think it's so important to get that advice before taking action to protect yourself.
Yeah, and even if you can't afford, and divorce is incredibly expensive, I emerged from my divorce $60,000 in debt. That was my settlement.
That's all?
Yeah, exactly. And some people are like, oh, I'm only walking away with X. And some people spend hundreds of thousands to get out of it. And here's the thing. The way I looked at it was, if I was in prison in a third world country and it cost me $60,000 to break out and be free, I'd do it in a half a second. And that's kind of how it felt living under my roof. And so if you're at the point where you know that your life experience is so diminished and destroyed because of where you are, you have to ask yourself, okay, what if we go into a basement apartment? What if my kids have to share the same bedroom? What if all of these things, but I regain my self-confidence, I can live in peace, I can raise my children in a healthy way, and I can work my way out of that situation into a better one. Which one do I choose? And when the fear can diminish and you can think clearly using your frontal cortex, people will make the choice that it's going to be hard. But look how hard it's been. It's been so hard. Maybe you had the material possessions, but life has been so hard. It'll be hard in a different way. The material stuff will be hard, but the emotional stuff won't be. And that's a game changer.
Right. And then when the fear diminishes, it's easier to realize you made the right decision.
And I do on my podcast, Journey Beyond Divorce, my podcast is in series. And one of my series is called Voices of Celebration. And we have between 2 and 3 dozen interviews now, all with people who were scared to death and seeing that life as they knew it was going to end. This was the hardest thing. This was going to be bad. They were going to be poor. They were going to be lonely. They were going to lose their children. They were going to whatever. And every single interview says, this ended up being the best thing that ever happened to me. I found myself. I regained my confidence. All my fears didn't come true. I did walk away with less, but it's okay because of A, B, and C. So if you're listening and you're scared.
That's me. I found my purpose.
Yeah. Go and listen to some of our Voices of Celebration, because it inspires so much hope and encouragement in people.
That's so true. So, person leaves or, starting to leave, or should already have an attorney when they leave, should have that counsel. But, we talked a little bit about, dealing with an attorney and dealing with the process. What advice do you have? So you enter that relationship with the attorney, in a good way, and the whole process is smooth.
So the first thing I'll say is people who've lived with a bully often go out and hire a bully attorney. And that's a very bad idea, because the bully attorney is going to bully you too. And so now you're going to be bullied by your spouse, and you're going to be bullied by your attorney, and you're going to be ignored by your spouse, and you're going to be ignored by that attorney. Every client I've ever had who's hired a pit bull of an attorney to fight their ex, was in like a double jeopardy, miserable situation. So when you go out, and what you're doing is hopefully you'll talk to a few attorneys, and what you're looking for, you need to, before you go and interview an attorney, we've got a couple of podcasts and even articles on Journey Beyond Divorce and the questions that you should ask. But when you go to meet with these attorneys, what is it that you want? And the first thing I want to say to you is, this person is going to advocate a settlement that has to work for you for the rest of your life. You need somebody who hears you, sees you, respects you. You need somebody who, when you send an email, responds to you. When you leave a phone call, responds to you. Now, if you're a hot mess and you're rambling on and you're contacting your attorney 10 times a day, then it's not on the attorney. But if you're being calm and reasonable and touching base when you need to, and you're chasing that attorney, and I just spoke to someone yesterday who got so taken, and the attorney wouldn't return the calls, and the attorney ended up blaming the client. It is so important. This is your first relationship as you leave your marriage. Make sure it's a healthy one. Make sure that you know what you're looking for. Yes, basics, you want them. Number one, they should be a matrimonial attorney. Number two, they should practice regularly in your jurisdiction where your courts are. And then number three, you want to start looking at what is their client service like? Because that's going to be vital. What's the saying? The surgery was a success, but the patient died. You don't want to be in a situation where you're doubly miserable going through your divorce because you've hired an unhealthy or bully attorney.
I would say they should have a good relationship with guardian ad litems, with the judges. We're well respected there. I hired a pit bull the first time, and when we had to go back to court, subsequent times, I had a more gentle, but everyone in the jurisdiction loved this person. And it was such a different experience. But the first time, guardian ad litem actually said, "I don't like your attorney." And it was like, well, oops. But it was such a difference when other people respected him too, because, having someone that's easy to work with on all accounts made such a difference.
And you and I are talking about litigation. And so let's just touch on that for a second.
Mm-hmm.
So there's mediation, there's collaboration, there's litigation, there's do-it-yourself, there's arbitration. But those three, litigation, collaboration, mediation, are your three typicals. I have had more clients leave mediation and collaboration and come and work with me and go into litigation. I now have 5 clients right now, all with high conflict personalities, all started out in mediation. The mediation just collapsed. If you want to mediate and collaborate, there are a couple of basics that you need. You need someone who's transparent. Is your partner transparent? Are they going to show all the financial documents? Are they going to do everything that they're supposed to do? Are they going to communicate honestly? They need to be flexible. So this is going to go against everything I just talked about with high conflict personalities. Right. They need to be flexible. They need to be able to hear you. They need to be able to pivot off of their position and be compromising. You do too, but that's usually not the problem. The problem is usually the high conflict personality. So if you go into mediation or collaboration, the professionals want it to succeed. Somebody's going to bend, and you're going to bend and bend and bend until you break or walk away. And so people do it because they think it's less expensive. But if you know, and if you're honest with a mediator about who your spouse is and how they show up, you need to think long and hard if you want to invest time and energy in mediation or collaboration, because if you don't have transparency, flexibility, collaboration, cooperation, communication, you are not going to successfully mediate or collaborate, and you're going to end up in the court system anyway. And the positive thing about the courts is I like to say that the court acts like most people. Did you go to trial, Amy?
In the divorce, we mediated and I gave in.
You did? Okay. So a lot of people end up only like a very, very small percentage of people go to trial. And even with high conflict personalities, you have to have a certain amount of money. You have to have a couple of $100,000 minimum to go to trial because it costs so much, and certainly in most states. But even if just because you go to court doesn't mean you're going to trial. When you go to court, the court acts as a traffic cop. And so you show up for your first conference. In many states, it's called a preliminary conference. You kind of give the lay of the land. I got the financials. He didn't give in the financials. We're arguing over custody. We don't have much to split, or we have a lot to split. And the court knows. And then they start scheduling you every, let's say, 4 weeks to 8 weeks. And the judge wants to see that you've moved. And so where in mediation and collaboration, someone can just go silent on you and do nothing. In the courts, no judge is going to put up with one party just ignoring and not doing anything for a long period of time. And so there's some protections and some boundaries that you get when you're in the court system. And in my humble and totally personal opinion, it's not right or wrong, it's just mine, is that if you've got a high conflict personality, you're probably better off in the courts.
Yeah, but that's a regret of mine.
Yeah.
That in the initial settlement, because when we were in trial for subsequent things, it was completely different.
Yeah. And I'd love to talk just a little bit about what does the spouse of the high conflict personality bring to the table, because the high conflict personality is so displeasing. We're crystal clear. We could all wax on for a long time about what that person's shortcomings and problems are.
Right.
But the truth is, energetically, we are at the same emotionally energetic level as them. And so there's a reason that people who are attracted to high conflict personalities tend to be codependent. And codependence is, if you don't know what it is, you should research it. I have an article on my site. The article is called, Am I a Codependent? It's 25 questions. Go, answer them, see where you are on the spectrum. There's a little grid on the bottom that tells you where you are on the spectrum. And so what does it mean to be codependent? In a nutshell, we give out ourselves for others. And so everybody else is on the list. We're not even on that page. And we train people to expect us to bend over backwards, to do everything, to really be selfless. Now, nobody should be selfish in a marriage and with children, but there's a big gap between selfless and selfish, and what falls in between is self-loving. And so if you expect other people to love you, you have to love yourself. And if you're constantly giving things up and doing for everyone else, you're saying yes, no one has a gun to your head. And then you're the martyr, and you're angry, and you're bitter, and you're resentful. And this is like so common. So the codependent piece is something to really look at. And there's a difference between healthy caretaking and unhealthy codependence. Codependence comes from this place of fear. I have to, I'm obliged to, I have to, or else. I want to so that I can control him. If I have sex with him, he'll leave me alone. If I do what he asked me to, I'll have a little peace. It's a controlling piece. Caretaking, healthy caretaking is very different. Healthy caretaking is, I love my child. I'm going to give up this event because I want to be there for my child. There's no fear in that. That's coming from love and service and compassion. It's a healthy emotional level compared to that fear obligatory level.
Right. It's not rushing home to cook dinners to make sure you please the spouse.
Right.
Or not get in trouble.
Right. Yeah. And so codependence is a big one. And the other one that I find goes hand in hand with that is people pleasing. Oftentimes, those who've been attracted to and are engaged in high conflict divorces are really worried about what other people are going to think. And even people,
I hear that a lot in my office.
And even people that don't know them. What do you care what the neighbor down the block on the corner thinks? What do you care what your kids' best friends, mother's sister thinks? Like, why is this so important? And it's really something for us to look at, because people pleasing is a shortcoming that comes from broken confidence. And when you emerge from people pleasing and you don't please anymore, it doesn't mean that you're not a pleasing person. It just means you're on the page, you're on the list, what you need and what you desire is more important. There is such a liberation and such a freedom when you break through codependence and people pleasing. And the third one, I call them like the evil triplets. So we have codependence, people pleasing, self-condemnation. So not only have you been maybe put down by your parents because it started someplace, or criticized by your parents, but then you've married somebody who belittles and berates and criticizes you, you don't even need them, because when you step away, you're belittling and berating yourself between your ears. And so I would say to your listeners, stop and pay attention to how you talk to yourself when you make a mistake, when you do something, when you have regret. I used to call myself an effing idiot. My inner critic was, you're such an effing idiot, all the time. Now I cringe even saying that. But I didn't need my ex to put me down, because even when he wasn't around, I was putting myself down. When we keep pushing ourselves into those lower emotional energies, we are working against ourselves. And so a lot of the work we do is helping people grow out of codependence, people pleasing, and these kinds of behaviors.
Right. I see that a lot in my office for people, and I say, you don't need to continue the narrative. They're not here, but they still use that same tape. It's constantly playing, even though the relationship's over.
Yeah.
I'm usually not even aware until it's pointed out.
But if they're not aware, it's totally unconscious. And when you
Yeah.
point it out, I was just speaking to someone yesterday, and I said, that's your, we always, in coaching, there's always an action plan between now and the next time we meet. I want you to start paying attention to how you talk to yourself. And here's, if anyone's a parent, here's a really good tip. Pay attention to how you speak to yourself. And then if you have children, the question is, would you ever speak to your children the way you speak to yourself if they made a mistake or they, did something wrong or what have you? And the answer is always exactly the same. Oh my God, never. And so from now on, when something happens and you criticize yourself, I want you to take a moment, take a breath, and then have an internal dialogue with yourself that you would have with your child, and see how kind and gentle you're capable of being with yourself. And it's a practice. You have to do it on a regular basis until it becomes just unconscious and just a healthy habit.
Yeah, and if you don't have children, a friend,
A best friend,
stranger, even like the person at the grocery checkout aisle.
Yep.
Most people will be like, oh, I would never talk like that, because people pleasing, not going to talk like that.
That's right. And so don't do it to yourself either.
Right. We talked about, about some of the jargon and the terminology that gets thrown around easily, and advice about not using it in court.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that?
Yeah. And even with your attorney, I would say in general, if you're not a psychologist, and you're married to someone that you think is a narcissist, I can guarantee you they haven't been diagnosed because they don't think they have a problem. And so you diagnosing them and then going to the professionals in the divorce field with your diagnosis immediately diminishes you. It immediately diminishes you. Talk about the fact that you're married to someone who you believe has a high conflict personality. That's not a diagnosis, my experience. And then don't say he gaslights me all the time. What does that mean? Say, you go in, and when you meet with your attorney, you explain that I want to explain, and they'll ask, what's the dynamic? What's led you here? And you begin to explain a couple of examples. And I'm going to tell you, when someone meets me for the first time, they want to give me 20 examples. After the first 2 examples, I'm like, please stop. I hear you. I got it. Let's put the problem aside now and go into the solution. So if you want to be, and wait a second, there's one more story. No, you wouldn't believe, you diminish yourself. So don't call it gaslighting. Don't call him or her a narcissist. Talk about your experience. You will be so much more respected going in level-headed, saying, these are the kinds of things that I'm experiencing, that I'm concerned about. This is why I'm concerned for my children, because these are the kinds of behaviors mom or dad exhibit with the children or around the children. You calmly and articulately explain the experience. You do not label and act like a junior psychiatrist.
Right. I'm glad you brought children up. For people that are co-parenting or facing co-parenting, how do we co-parent with high conflict personality? I know we've both done it, but what wisdom do you have for people that are facing it?
Yeah. I think across the board, one of the things I would say is we do a lot of group coaching programs. And what I'll say is find either a local group, and divorcecare.com is a great way to find a local group. It does have a Christian twist to it, but it's one of the only groups nationwide that you can find almost any place. When you're sitting around other people going through a divorce, there's a comfort and a normalization in it. And that's really helpful in general. And then when it comes to co-parenting, I want to say one of the biggest problems people have is their own resistance. They expect the co-parent now to show up differently than he or she showed up as their spouse. They're not changing. And so, but they have to, and they should. And I can't believe that's what I hear so often. I can't believe he did X, Y, and Z with the children.
When I told him to do this.
Yeah. Has he ever listened to you before? No. So why can't you believe that he didn't listen to you this time? Has he ever done that with the kids before? Yeah, so often. Well, why are you so surprised that he did it again? That is on you, not him or her. The high conflict.
People think co-parenting means you have two houses doing the same thing, but it's not.
Here's the rule. How goes the marriage, so goes the divorce. And so goes the co-parenting. And the only way you're going to live in peace and joy as a co-parent to a high conflict personality is to step into the full reality of what that person is and isn't. And so in my case, I was belittled every month when it was time for me to get my quote unquote extortion check. There was one time where my ex was so angry, and he came to pick up the kids, and my older child was so scared, and I don't want to go, and I'm scared to go. And I called his therapist, and the therapist said, your number one responsibility is the health and safety of your son. And so I told my ex he wasn't going with him, and he's like, it's my custody time. And I said, I understand that. And I'm not taking away your custody, but today he's not going with you. And he said he was going to call the cops. And I said, I think you should call the police. I'll put on a pot of coffee. Let me know when they're here. And he was a lot of bark and no bite. And he went home and had a whole lot to say to me, probably sent me a 4-page email about what a horrible person I was. But what you do is you set boundaries. I'd like to talk about boundaries. You set firm boundaries, and you live in the reality of what that person is. And here's the deal. There's a lot that they do that is not debilitating to your child. It's displeasing. And so you may have a parent who demands 50-50, and then the kids are under the same roof with mom or dad, but there's no connection. There's no time together. They're physically in the same space, but the kids are kind of on their own. Yes, that sucks. And yeah, it'd be nice to change, but instead of trying to change the other parent, you begin to talk to the children. I did this all the time. We're always sitting in front of the TV. Daddy's in his office. He doesn't spend any time with us. He doesn't pay attention to us. Okay, so the next time they come home, we start talking about, what do you want to do when you're at dad's next time? Because dad's not going to be engaging with you like you would like. So Do we want to get you a paint set? Do you want to do this? Do you want to have a play date? And the brilliant thing is when you begin to help the children, you're not putting the other parent down, you're talking about their experiencing, and then you're helping them come up with healthy coping mechanisms. So nobody's denying reality. You go to dad's, you don't spend time with dad, or you go to mom's, you don't spend time with mom, as one example. And when we help our children problem solve, we are creating problem solvers. When we help our children live in the reality of what is, we are creating people who can live and practice acceptance versus resistance. And so when I coach around co-parenting, and we're going to do a whole post-divorce co-parenting program, a support group for people, we look at what are the skills that you need. You need to be able to regulate your own emotions. You need to pick and choose your battles. You need to understand and be so skilled at boundaries, rock solid at boundaries. You need to notice when you're trying to control the other person. It's never going to work. And then there's 3 A's. You never want to admonish your ex. You never want to advise your ex, and you never want to apologize to your ex, to your high conflict personality. And that comes from Bill Eddy, who is like the king of high conflict. He runs the High Conflict Institute, if you want to look it up. No advising, no admonishing, and no apologizing. If you advise, it's going to blow up on you. If you admonish, it's going to blow up on you. If you apologize, it's going to be used against you. And so there are a lot of rules that we teach people. And then how do you say something? What is your communication style? Do you fly off the handle? Do you become the rageaholic? Do you look like the one who's frothing at the mouth because you're so frustrated? Because if you do, you're diminishing your own position. There are ways of showing up calm, clear, confident, collected, and presenting as the healthier person to the judge, to the attorney, and post-divorce with the children in a way that will serve your children. You want to be a stand for the healthiest version of yourself so that you're breaking generational chains and your children aren't repeating the same thing that they grew up in.
Mm-hmm. And I think with that too, not communicating through the children.
Yes.
So they don't feel like they're making decisions too, or, can you tell daddy this? Can you tell mommy this? Because that's not fair to them.
You don't communicate through the children, and you don't put down the other parent to the children, nor do you sit in the kitchen talking to your girlfriend on the phone, putting down your spouse or soon to be ex within earshot of the children. Your children are 50% of your spouse. And when you put dad or mom down, they're hearing that half of them is bad and broken and wrong. And so it's every expert will tell you, you got to get it off your chest. Talk to your therapist, your coach, your girlfriend, your guy friend. Do not do it in earshot of the kids, and do not, under any circumstances, put your ex down in front of your kids. And the other thing is, regardless of how your spouse behaves, I don't know anyone who brings children into the world and doesn't love them. I mean, I'm sure there's some variation of mental illness and brokenness, but to a large degree, I have someone very near and dear to me who has borderline personality. She's a beautiful young woman, and she has a mental illness that she has to deal with. And so they didn't ask for it. And this is probably the hardest message I deliver. I never thought I would have compassion for my ex. I have such deep compassion for him. He's so displeasing. But he also didn't ask for it. He didn't wish to be this way. This is whether it's through DNA or socialization. And when it comes to a lot of these personalities, and narcissism for sure, there's no pharmaceutical medication, and there's no talk therapy that can help them. And it's really very sad. And they're very displeasing. So they tend to be very isolated and alone, or everyone who's their friend only knows them for 4 to 6 months, because after that, nobody sticks around. And so when you can say to your kids, your other parent loves you, They may be displeasing. They may not show it well, but I don't want you to think that your parent doesn't love you. They love you completely. And maybe you don't believe that. And maybe that's something for you to consider, because when a child thinks that one of their parents doesn't love them, that's devastating on such a foundational level.
So, and I think that's so important, because we talk about different forms of trauma, but that feeling of neglect or being unloved is one of the worst that someone can experience, because it sends that message, I'm not here, I'm not worthy.
Exactly. And I think that it's so important that if we couldn't stay married to the personality and our children have the rest of their lives with that personality, and you've emerged healthy from that divorce, it's your responsibility to teach your children how to navigate a difficult personality. And you do that by asking more than you tell, 2 ears, 1 mouth, because what you want to do, and this is what coaching is all about, is pulling out the wisdom from the other person, helping them. If I tell you, Amy, what to do, you may not have any buy-in. You didn't come up with it on your own. You didn't work it through, as opposed to if the same problem is on the table and I ask questions and what do you think and why do you think that and what else could you do, and really help you get at what's perfectly, uniquely your solution. You're going to have buy-in and you're going to stick with it. And that's what we can do with our children. And it grows their emotional intelligence. It grows their problem solving. It grows their boundaries. It grows their ability to use their voice and say what you mean, but don't say it mean. Even if your dad is mean or your mom is mean, you don't say it mean. You be respectful, but you say it, you speak it. When we start teaching all of these things, we raise healthy, confident children, in spite of the fact that they have a parent, perhaps with a personality disorder.
Then they learn to be intuitive and analytical and ask questions, which is what we want.
Exactly.
So that's so important. Thank you for that. So you mentioned your programs a few times. Can you tell us a bit about them and how listeners can find you?
Yeah. So the company is Journey Beyond Divorce. We've got a website with about 400 articles. All you have to do is go to the search under the blog, look up anything you're looking for. And we've got a podcast with, I think, 250 episodes. We've been at it since 2016. So those are on the website too. I interview every expert there is. So it's a great way, especially if you're financially tied, to get expert advice without paying for it. And then we do a lot of one-on-one coaching. I have a team of 6 coaches plus myself, and we do one-on-one coaching across the English-speaking world. And then we have programs for people who can't afford the one-on-one coaching. And so we do a lot of group coaching. So we have a high conflict divorce support group that launches in early April. And it'll be relaunching every 4 to 12 weeks. So that's something that people can learn more about. And then our newest program is Get Off the Fence and Leave Your Toxic Marriage. And what that does is it helps individuals in those early stages. And I don't know about you, but I felt like I was sitting on the fence for 2 or 3 years. The thing was halfway up my butt at the time I made a decision. Yeah. And should I stay or should I go? And it's so confusing. And just the decision to leave, and then what I need to know legally, when am I going to tell my spouse? What am I going to tell my spouse? Who's my support team? What skills do I need? Just that very, very early stage. We have a 6-week program that gets you 2 feet into the divorce with some self-confidence, education, support, and clarity. And so that's on our website too, Journey Beyond Divorce. And then our third one is an accelerated divorce program. And that one takes you through 12 steps. The first one is curbing the conflict, which every high conflict person needs to study. We have 2 on emotional healing and grieving. We have 1 on the thinking, our chaotic thinking in our head, and one on the stories we tell ourselves and how our own stories diminish our self-confidence. And so the Accelerated Divorce Program really addresses all of the thoughts and feelings that cause us problems and gives a huge toolbox of strategies and tips for changing your own behavior so that you can be better in the divorce and a better co-parent post-divorce.
Great. A lot of information and resources you're providing.
Yeah.
So I think our listeners can definitely benefit.
Yeah. And I'll say the last thing I'll say is we have a free giveaway. And so if you're resonating with what I'm saying, we do a free coaching call with anyone who is ready to look into whether or not coaching is right for them. And so it's a rapid relief call. And it's rapidreliefcall.com, and you can book your ideal time, and me or one of the coaches will get on a call with you and we'll help you get clear and come up with a few action steps. So that's a great one to grab.
Right. Well, I will put that in the show notes so people can access it as well. Thank you for providing that as well. And thank you for being with us. I think our listeners learned a lot from you.
Well, thanks so much for having me. This is such an important topic, and I so appreciate that you're completely focused on this piece in your podcast, which is, it's just, we need more and more good information out there.
Right. Well, thank you again. And for our listeners, please tune in next time. If you purchase the course Hope After Narcissistic Abuse, you will be able to listen to modules on boundary setting, codependency, as well as special sections on how to co-parent with a narcissist and navigating divorce with a narcissist. And both these will include live Zoom sessions that you can participate and ask questions. The link to the course, again, will be in the show notes. I hope you can join us. Thank you so much. Thank you again for tuning in to our podcast, Hope After Narcissistic Abuse. We hope you were able to leave with some renewed hope. And if you like what you heard, please subscribe to the channel, give us a review, head to the show notes for more information on the things that we highlighted. And there's also a link to the website for a course that we offer on the same topic, Hope After Narcissistic Abuse. Thank you again, and please tune in to the next episode.